Hello, I'm Catherine Sines, the president of the Rotary Club of Hudson. Rotary is a professional organization of a group of men and women who support Rotary International. We also join together by a common interest of service to our Hudson community, and we have a sincere desire to give back. We meet weekly on Wednesdays at Laurel Lake Retirement Community, 200 Laurel Lake Drive, in their dining room. We meet from 7:30 to 8:30 and would like to invite you to join us. For more information about Rotary, go to www.rotaryhudson.org. Enjoy the following excerpts from one of our recent meetings and consider joining us on Wednesday morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Ron.
Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson, and welcome to all of our members and guests. I'm Ron Strobel, the Sergeant at Arms, and our invocation this morning is by Kelly Brennan.
Yeah, I'm as surprised as the rest of you.
There it is in black and white. Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly. Good morning, Kelly.
Excuse me. Oh, come on. Everybody would bow their heads. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. For food in a world where many walk in hunger, for faith in a world where many walk in fear, for friends in a world where many walk alone, we give you thanks, O Lord. Amen.
Amen. That wasn't too bad, was it? Very good.
Thank you. And lead us in the pledge and the four-way test this morning, Elizabeth Kowalik.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
and the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First,
Is it the truth?
second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
and fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you. And to lead us in song, Dick Pearsall.
Okay. I think it's a good day we should be smiling, so that's what we're going to sing when you're smiling. When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. When you're laughing, the sun comes shining through. But when you're crying, that rain on the rain, so stop that sighing. Be happy again, because when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. Very good, very good.
Thank you, Dick. And now our president, Catherine Sines.
Good morning, Rotarians. Wow, we have a full house. Good to see everyone. Next, we have Chris Barker, our club secretary, to introduce our visitors.
Last night, but Tuesday night.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests. We have our friends from the Hudson Service Learning class with us today, so if you can please join me as we welcome code teachers Lonnie Banner and Jamie Cosman. And then, thank you. And we have two of their students with us today, Aaron Williams and Ryan Mattis. Thanks for joining us today.
You did so well with the wave. Why don't you guys come on up? Lonnie and Jamie. And I was asked, and I'm even going to say who it was by, Tom Tobin, to tell you that she is way too cute to be your granddaughter, Dan. You know, he couldn't see the resemblance at all.
Right on that side of the
Oh, okay. You're welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're well. Just want to first off thank you for all of your help with Camp Ledgewood last week. Joe Avella, Ron Strobel, we did a lot of mulching, painting, removing of nails so boards could be reused. We worked on a project with Suzanne Hirsch. It's a Random Acts of Kindness rock project. So if you see little painted rocks around town, you're supposed to pass it on to other people to keep the kindness going, amongst other things. And yeah, we did everything from yoga to 1990s hip hop. It was a great trip. So
she could lead 1990s hip hop with you one morning.
Which is scary. So, anyways, but we thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. We have two fantastic students here to talk to you today, Ryan and Aaron. So, whoever would like to go first.
So I'm Ryan Mattis, and I'm part of the Service Learning family, and I work at, I volunteer at Haven Homes Assisted Living up in Kent, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy like meeting all the residents and hearing their stories. It's really everyone, all 13 of them. They come from really different backgrounds, so it's really interesting to like get to know them. And I'm planning on going to Arizona State University, so that's kind of what my future is going to look like. That's me. So.
Hello, I'm Erin Williams. I volunteer at the Salvation Army Soup Kitchen in Akron. What we do there, we cook meals, we prepare the meals, package them, and then seal them so they can go to the food trucks and out to different locations. One of my favorite parts that we do there is make sauce. So people there love sauce. So there's this one girl named Miss Ella. She's volunteered there for 17 years. And she'll come up to me and be like, hey, go make some sauce. So I'll run to the pantry, find some random ingredients like mustard, ketchup, barbecue sauce, hot sauce, just throw them all in a bowl, mix it up, and sometimes it turns out good, and sometimes it doesn't. But, I mean, you learn from your mistakes, but it's one of my favorite memories there. And the good sauces, we usually write them down, and the other ones we just chunk. But I love doing it, and it's one of my favorite things we do there. Something I've learned at the Salvation Army is that people from all different backgrounds are there, and it's really cool because we are such a close-knit family, and no matter where you come from, it's like we always bond together. We cook the meals together, and it's just really cool to experience. And I'm planning to go major in international business. I'm not exactly sure what school. My top three are Ohio State, Indiana University, and Purdue. So hoping I get accepted.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, Boilermakers.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So does anybody have any questions for us?
Mr. Mattis, what do you hope to do? Do you have any idea about?
I left that out.
No is okay, but.
So I'd like to be a physical therapist or something in that field. So I'm going to study kinesiology at the moment. That might change, but that's the plan as of now. So I'm thinking Arizona State. Also, Ohio State is on the list of places I'm applying to. Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati. Those are my top three.
Okay.
Two are in Ohio, one is in Arizona. So, but
Are you going all through the Hudson school system?
yeah,
And
all
what
18
grades
years.
do you have to
17.
Erin, then? Yeah. How about that?
17 years?
Yeah, 18 in December.
I got a question for the Williams
We call it
Grand.
the 13-year club.
Tom?
13 years. That's
Tom.
If you got set back a few years, that's okay.
Yeah, I can see how that.
Tom, that's fine. Tom Tobin, you've been fine. I got a question for the Williams granddaughter. Where'd you get your height from?
That is a finable offense. That's right off the four-way.
My heels. Any other questions, friends? Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
And if Ryan looks familiar to any of you, he's been the person who's been helping us out with the audio-visual first couple weeks there. He's a little more dressed up this time, but he's always worn his tie. Thank you very much. I enjoy hearing their stories and finding out where they're going in their dreams. I love seeing them then at graduation. Next, Mayor Basil will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, President Catherine. And Aaron, I'll lean on your grandfather a little bit. As a diehard Purdue alum, I would love to see you go there. It is my distinct honor and privilege this morning to introduce our speaker, Congressman Dave Joyce. Dave was born in Cleveland and is a lifelong Ohioan. His father was a World War II veteran and his mother was a proud housewife, something that I think we both have in common. Dave graduated from West Geauga High School and earned both his bachelor's and law degrees from the University of Dayton. After graduation, he worked as a public defender in Cleveland and ran for Geauga County prosecutor in 1988, met his future wife Kelly while campaigning for that office. In 2005, the Ohio State Women's Bar Association presented Dave with the Family Friendly Workplace Award for providing his employees family-oriented office environment. In 2012, Dave was elected to Congress from Ohio's 14th District. He is currently serving his third term, sits on the influential House Appropriations Committee, as well as subcommittees on military construction and veterans affairs, interior and the environment, transportation and housing, and urban development. Dave has been a steadfast leader of the bipartisan effort to fully fund the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and has returned over $300,000 from his congressional budget to the U.S. Treasury since 2013. He resides in Russell Township with his wife, Kelly. They have 3 children, Trenton, Kylie, and Bridie. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to our Congressman, Dave Joyce.
Thank you, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here again. As most of you know, that this is a spot that has fond memories in that my mom and dad were here and both passed here, so it's nice to see some of the people, the nurses who still remember you for your time here. But I know what a great job that they did and how my parents at least had the ability to enjoy the remaining years of their life in such a beautiful setting here. But it's also nice, really nice to be home this week. The only bad part is, and I'm sorry if my eyes are a little puffy and I'm a little hoarse, but see, my wife now lets both the golden retrievers lay in the bed, and I actually have to pull the one off my pillow, and when I get home to be able to get at my spot on the bed since I'm not around. And for whatever reason, I woke up about 2:30 or 3 in a little bit of an allergy attack. So I'm just, if I'm not at the top of the game, give me a little bit of a break there. But it is nice to be home because, again, this is the land of common sense where we get things done. And when you go back to craziness that is Washington, D.C., you can't wait to get back home. One nice thing I do have now is my youngest daughter, Bridie, or our youngest daughter, Bridie, she graduated from Ohio State in international relations. And she worked this summer as an intern in the Foreign Relations Committee, and now she's seeking a job in D.C. But it's nice to have somebody from home that every now and then you could stop by the office and just help ground you a little bit, that everybody is not insane in this town. But you probably hear a lot of we're not getting things done, and I just want to dispel that. That's just not true. One of the things we've got done, and I know some of you have heard me talk about this before, but part of my job on the appropriations is to take our budget and then with the amounts that are set by the budget, appropriate that to the committees that come before me, on the committees I'm on, the agencies that come before us. And, you've heard me say before, too, that we needed to get this done because for the last 5 years I've been there, and certainly for a long time now, we've been running on with CRs, or continuing resolutions, which is where you take the amount of money that was spent the last term and you hand it over to the administration, and they spend it the way they see fit, or an omnibus, which pretty much accomplishes the same thing, only a little longer term. This year, we actually passed all 12 of our appropriation bills out of committee, and out of subcommittee, out of committee, and then on the floor. All 12 bills where they've gone over to the Senate. And you say, well, that doesn't seem like a big deal. Well, let me tell you, the last time it happened was Browns won a playoff game. Really almost 20 years ago. And you don't think that's a big accomplishment, but it is. Because what we finally do is take back spending, and the only way we're going to control spending and cut the deficit is if we take back our spending and do it the way you see fit. The power of the purse belongs in the House. It was our job and our responsibility to do that. And as a committee, we became committed to the fact that we went and worked the floor and worked other members to explain to them. And I found this process worked very well when I was trying to do it with the GLRI, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, GLRI bill, is that people are against spending. But when you explain to them, look, the money's going to be spent, here's how it's going to be spent. This is the high water mark on how government works, in that the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers and every agency that wants any funding or has anything to do with it has to work together. Nobody's in charge, everybody's in charge. They have to share the information and work towards the common goal of what better than making sure we take care and protect and preserve our Great Lakes. When I like to say, it's not a lake or a series of lake, but a national treasure. And so using that method of explaining through how we're going to spend money was very good about getting those things done. Secondly, you might have heard that we may not have done all that well on the healthcare vote, but we moved on to taxes. And the good part about the taxes is that, one, we have to do it, but before we announced what we were going to do, we had the House, the Senate, and the White House agree to, at least in principle, what the reforms are going to look like. And so then we announced it all together instead of having, 3 separate versions like they did with the healthcare bill, all being tried to be pushed together. So as we're working forward, the long and short of it is that we have to bring back we have been in a tax model that was offshoring our businesses. When Ireland had a problem, Ireland reduced their corporate tax rate to 12%. It made sense for public companies for certain, because if you can go from the 35% down to 12% just by moving your headquarters, you don't have to move a lot of people, you don't have to move your manufacturing plant, but you move your headquarters, then obviously if you can bring that much to the bottom line right away, you're going to do that. And we've lost 85 major corporations over the last 20 years to that, and it's something that we need to bring that money back home in what we call reshore it, and have that money, instead of being held offshore, invested into our manufacturing facilities and invested in our community, and in getting back money into the middle class pocket. And in that end, for those of you who are in the 1% that are at the highest tax bracket of 39%, I'm going to tell you now, I don't think you're going to get a tax break, because the idea is going to be to give double the standard deduction from to a family of individual get $12,000 and a family get $24,000, but also by lowering those rates so the middle income people will actually see more take-home pay and be able to put more in their pocket, which obviously means they can put more in their community and more in their kids' accounts and pay for college and all those good things as well. But it's important that we reduce those rates so that we actually get the money to the people who are going to spend it the most. And so individually, we're going to reduce the rates into reduce the total to 3 different rates. And in corporate, we're going to do the same thing so we can at least be competitive. I know the president's talked about 15%. That's not going to occur. It's probably going to be somewhere in the 20 to 24%. But what we're doing is trying to take, when you throw out all the things you want to get done, that's $2.4 trillion in taxes that we want to cut. We've only got the ability to cut $1.5 trillion. So some of the things that you hear about, like the state and local tax deduction being lost because you're going to double the standard exemption, or standard deduction, there's certain things that are going to give way. One of the things you hear is, for those realtors who are out here, I know that you're worried about the home mortgage interest deduction. That will stay in place at least for the first house, or for sure for the first house, but probably be lost on second houses and other entities like that. But lastly, I want to touch on something that I've been fighting for, and maybe it's the ex-prosecutor in me since I've got to D.C., but it started when I was back in Geauga County as a prosecutor, and much to my dismay, as I got to D.C., I'm in a former bipartisan prosecutors group where we get together and talk about where we can have an impact. And I brought up the opioid problem. And I can tell you, to a person throughout the country, everyone's experienced the same thing. And it's sad. When you think about it, we've lost 4 times the amount of people to opioid or just drug substance abuse deaths than we did to the Vietnam War. And I've said before, we have to declare, if we want to fight the thing, I mean, we've had this other war on drugs since the 70s, as we know, hasn't accomplished a lot, but we've spent a lot of money, but we haven't accomplished anything. But, heroin is much more specific, and opioids are more specific, and we need to declare war on it. And I'm glad to hear the president finally say the same thing on Monday and go after the sources with all the forces that we have, because we can't afford to lose any more kids. And I'm sure everybody in this community at least knows some family that was touched by it. And it's sad, and it's something that we cannot continue to let happen to our youth. There was a very interesting 60 Minutes segment on the other day that laid out how the drug companies are actually complicit in this by knowing that there was such volume going into certain areas. There was something like 9 million pills that went into a town of 400 people in West Virginia. That gives you an idea that they weren't, either something's vastly wrong there, or they knew what they were doing and didn't care what they were doing. And I know a case that I had right before I left, that a Giant Eagle pharmacy in Chardon, one of the techs had stole 85,000 Vicodin before she got caught. And she said she was stealing them for her husband, who was addicted, but she was also selling them on the side. But what drove me nuts is that the pharmacy, as you know, in business, your internal controls should set off bells and whistles. If you've lost 85,000 things in inventory and you don't show any expense or receipt for them, and especially when you're talking about something as toxic and abused as the opioids are. So that's something that we declared it an emergency. The last time we declared an emergency like this on something was the Zika virus in Puerto Rico. We were going to declare it as a war, and we're going to start the war on it. But it's something that I think we need to do, because with all else that's going on in the country, this is one that touches every part of our country. There's not a state or municipality that hasn't had it. And the unfortunate part is Ohio, bless you, Ohio actually leads the country in opioid deaths. And that's not what I want to be number one in. I'm a proud guy. I want to be number one, but that's certainly not the thing we want to be known as number one for. So that's one thing that I've been working on with Rob Portman in the Senate, trying to create, and I've testified in the Senate, and he's come over to the House, trying to join together the House and Senate, and now with the president, and fight this scourge that's running across our country. But most important about being home, and I know this is one of those groups that's very good about it, is I like to hear from you. I want to answer your questions and hear from you what you think's going on, so I can go back and properly represent you in Washington. I've been here to see the mayor and toured some of the new things that are going on. The mayor's been very good.
We're going to turn you up a little bit.
Okay.
Hopefully we won't
I could yell louder.
yeah. Hopefully we won't get feedback.
Is that loud enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But I was saying, I've had the opportunity to be here and walk around town with the mayor, and the mayor's been very good about staying in touch with me with the needs of and concerns of Hudson and what's been going on. But it's important that I hear from all of you as to what you think is important. So I'd be glad to entertain any questions from anybody, especially the young ones that are here.
Well, since I have the mic, I'll lead off.
Bombs away.
James Field, I'm on the local school board here, as well as Tom. And so the fight against opioids is obviously near to us as well.
Sure.
And I know that, as you mentioned, there's some powerful interests that donate lots of money to political campaigns that might be affected. But that's actually not my question. And this is about something which, it may not be a committee that you're on, but it's something that affects Hudson for sure. I don't know if you're familiar with FATE, free and appropriate public education. That's, okay.
Is that a bill that's pending?
No, no.
Okay.
That's actually, so I'll explain it, because I had to learn about it myself. So that's actually been around a long time. And what it is, and I'm going to read from here, an educational right of children with disabilities in the United States that's guaranteed by the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Individuals with Disability Acts, IDEA. And so it's a federal law. And what it does is guarantee children, regardless of disability, a full education.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a wonderful law because now you have kids who, in years past, would never have reached their fullest potential. And regardless of their disability, they now get an education in the public schools that's appropriate. And our superintendent could probably explain it better than I, but, and so what that means is, if someone has a disability, the school is responsible for arranging an educational plan for them. And I am fully supportive. I do not want FAPE to go away. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Now that you've explained it, I have a better understanding because I was also as the prosecutor, I represented all the school boards for 25 years in Geauga County, so I know exactly what you're talking
So
about.
what I'm about to say is in no way saying that we should not have FAPE, because I think it's really benefited millions of kids.
But unfortunately, it's very expensive.
So what it can be. So what happens is, if you think a normal cost per child in a school system such as Hudson would be maybe $10,000 to $16,000 a year, someone with disabilities that could be $20,000, $30,000, and we budget appropriately for that. But it can go up higher, and if someone has some very severe disabilities, it could be upwards of over $100,000 a year, and over a full career in school could be in millions. So my question is this, or my recommendation is this, is we pick a level that we feel schools should be responsible for, but this is really a benefit to society. And from my thought, the Congress should have something almost like an insurance that if the costs get beyond a certain level, that then there would be public funding for that. Now, there is public funding that we can apply for to get reimbursed for disability expenses. So we fill out all the forms. Catherine Sines, as the treasurer, knows this. It's a huge amount of work, and we tend to get about, I think at best, maybe 20 cents on the dollar reimbursement. So if it's $100,000 costs, you maybe get 20. And that doesn't happen that often. It's very rare. But when a school district has someone with very severe needs, it can be very expensive. So my question or my suggestion is if there's a way that Congress could, along with FAPE, have some way for school districts that are facing extremely high expenses to get held harmless for that high level. I don't think, in general, it wouldn't be a huge budget item. It's huge for any individual district, but when you spread it across all districts or across the country, it's obviously a lot less.
Well, it's a problem in every district, as far as the funding aspect of it. This is one thing where I think the federal government did a nice job of saying that, you know, all the kids, no matter what the disability is, should be educated and try to make the most of their lives as a productive citizen. But unfortunately, this is where I think the Department of Education shouldn't exist. Some of the things we've done like that, I get, but then we should block grant that money to the states, because I think the state and local school boards working in concert can do much more and be much more efficient with that money than having these dictates or mandates come from Washington with no idea of the cost and the effect on local school districts. Hudson's blessed in that you have a good tax base and you have a great student population and all, but when you get into smaller communities and you have a number of kids at one time, it can eat up 20 to 30% of their whole school budget for some of the things that happen. So I understand what you're saying, but that is also going to require some type of whole-scale change on how we do business as the Department of Education. But there's a lot of Department of Education being one that I think we should shutter. I think it's best done in the state and local communities, because let's face it, people move to Hudson because of the great school district, right? It's part of that's why you vote for the levies, because that's one of the things that makes a community great. And people take pride in their local school districts. So that's something that is much better dealt with in a local and state level than it is at the DC and letting some bureaucrat tell you how you should run your school.
Yeah, so just before we leave it, I get that it may need some major changes, but I was hoping for maybe a more near-term ability to specifically help out.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but to that end, we're $20 trillion in debt and growing. And we continue to talk about the tax cuts. And the tax cuts, our revenue in D.C. is your taxes. And so when we're cutting the taxes, that's cutting the amount of revenue that's coming in, which will increase the deficit in the short term. So the only way you can get at, fixing the problem, the solution is cutting the agency that's spending all the money, getting rid of those employees, and taking that money and block granting it back to the states, where states will have the funding necessary to make these decisions. That's what I was trying to get at, but I might have been a little long-winded in how I was going about that. But it's not as though there's a set pool of funds that we can go tap that's just sitting there waiting, because believe me, as we were going through the appropriations process, especially when you started with the president's budget, that cut everything to zeros, which was unheard of. You learn we have to make changes in the way we do business, but we need to start to do that in a gradual basis. In some things we can cut with an axe, and some things we have to use a scalpel on. But the only way to get back to fiscal sense is to start cutting, because we can't continue spending at the rate we're at.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for coming today. Appreciate it. Some people have used words like erratic and impulsive, and in the case of Senator Corker, unstable, to describe President Trump. And right or wrong, I'm wondering how you find personally working with President Trump, and whether his actions like eliminating the health care subsidies last week are benefiting the voters of our district.
Well, the good part is, as of yesterday, it seems like there's some common sense coming out of Senators Alexander and Senator Murray. When the bill didn't pass, I've been part of a bipartisan group trying to figure out what we need to do in the short term to try to make sure that the system doesn't crash. Because, believe it or not, the Affordable Care Act was set up to crash. It was set up to become a single-payer system. There's no way it's going to maintain itself at the rate it was going. So my problem is that we had a chance to do something really big. Well, let me back up. My problem was, and this is when you realize you're a foot soldier in somebody else's army, was that we should have started with infrastructure, then went to taxes, and then did health care afterwards. But in the meantime, have thoughtful, deliberative hearings. We're blessed in Northeastern Ohio to have some tremendous institutions between the Cleveland Clinic, SUMA, Metro, and Lake County Health Systems. All the CEOs who I've talked to all have great ideas on how to bring down the cost of health care. The bill we were trying to pass, it did nothing for that, just shifted premiums. So we need to have the conversation sooner than later. Now, getting back to what's going on, I can't deal with the tweet du jour. It's just not, you didn't elect me to go there and play that game. You elected me to go there and get a job done. So we try to focus on the problems that are out there and solutions. And one thing I will say is it's a blessing to have General Kelly now in at the White House. It's time that the president starts to understand that whether he wants to or not, this is a 24/7, 365 quasi-military operation that he's in charge of. So it's nice to have a military person there making sure that he only gets the info he should get and not let people drop in and tell him whatever they just heard on Fox or whatever station that he likes. You really have to confine and compartmentalize the approach on how the president's getting his information. And I will tell you that when you go into, every now and then we have security briefings that, and the security briefings will include General Mattis, Secretary Tillerson, and every now and then it used to be Secretary Kelly. Now, you come out of there understanding that there's a lot of moving pieces, and there you got competent people who are overseeing those moving pieces. And so it's sort of like, pay no attention to the noise here. We're quietly going about and doing our business. And that's what we need to do in the House and Senate, just go about our business. Pass bills. If he wants to veto them, veto them. Then we'll keep passing more bills to fix the problems that are here. Because the one thing I found in my 5 years there is that America's got a lot of problems, and we're a little short on solutions. The one thing I will give him credit for is when he called out Chuck and Nancy. Because America wasn't built on one-party rule. America was built on people getting elected from their districts, going to Washington, talking about the problems, and in that marketplace of ideas, if you will, the idea that evolves that may have 80% approval or 75% approval, or in some cases 218 over 217 votes approval. But the idea is it's a majority work together. It's not your way or highway. It's together collaboratively that we're going to get things done. And so in that respect, I think we need to have those conversations because it pushes those people like the Freedom Caucus and the far left progressives off and gets the people who are there like myself that want to govern and want to do the right thing, the opportunity to work on real solutions to our problems. So, he was duly elected by the people of this country, and so just as I didn't necessarily vote for President Obama, but he's my president, and I'm going to work for him, and I'm going to stand behind him when times are tough. And with this president, he will continue to work together in the House and Senate and try to get things done. Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. My question has to do with health care insurance for kids.
Mm-hmm.
We have
CHIP?
Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be all for kids, and now it's kind of 20% for kids and 80% for adults. And we have CHIP, and CHIP's been lost. I mean, we don't have, CHIP has not been reauthorized.
It's true, but the funding in Ohio will exist until at least April. So while they say it's not authorized, the funding levels are there to get them through, and it's something we need to deal with.
Yeah, my question would be, what is the possibility down in Washington of carving out or separating insurance, healthcare insurance for kids separately from adults? Because kids can't vote, and they just kind of lost in the system today.
That's a good point. Part of the solution has to be energizing, through the tax code, you can apply incentives and disincentives for how money's spent. And when you think about it, 60-some% of the people going to work today are getting their health insurance from their employer. And so we have to incentivize that. The federal government shouldn't be should be a last resort, not the first resort. And so that's why I'm not a fan of single-payer systems. I think we need to do the things that are necessary. We also need to do the things necessary to bring the cost of health care. As I was explaining before, one of the reasons I had a huge problem with the bill is the speaker kept telling me, this is good policy. I said, well, okay, let's take your policy and application. I'm a 60-year-old guy. My dad died of melanoma. I have melanoma myself, so I qualify as a pre-existing condition. I pay $1,400 a month. I'm on the Affordable Care Exchange in D.C. I pay $1,400 a month for my wife and I and 2 daughters and $6,000 deductible. Now, they were under this theory that they had, for people 50 to 64 would allow you to raise your premiums 3 to 5 times. So that means I'd be paying $4,200 to $6,000 a month for insurance. So explain to me where in your policy that's fair. And you can't do that to people because people aren't going to take the insurance. I mean, you're buying catastrophic care at that point. So we need to include systems. There has to be changes in the way that we put out the health care and make sure that it's affordable, truly affordable health care, but also cost effective and cost efficient. And that, when you go in, one of the things I believe, your records are not your doctors, they're not the hospital, they're yours. In this day and age, you should be able to walk around and have all your records right here. When you walk into the hospital, even if you can't talk, they plug your phone in, they'll know exactly what the last test you had, what your conditions are. My wife works at the UH, in full disclosure here, she's a nurse. But it's just one of the things they said under the Affordable Care Act is going to cut down emergency room visits. It went up 75% because now people had insurance, but they didn't know how to use it. So the doctors in the emergency room were their primary care, which is the most expensive care we could give. most of the hospital systems now have people, for lack of a better term, concierge at the emergency room saying, you know, you really don't need the emergency room. You need to see a dentist. You'd be so amazed the amount of people who show up in emergency rooms because they have tooth hurts. UH gave me some numbers and they were staggering. But also, you know, the common cold, those type of things. You go to urgent cares. That's a lower cost. You have trained nurses or nurse practitioners who can help you in much lower rate. You also have to talk about wellness. I mean, if you want to smoke, you're going to pay more. You want to be overweight and, you know, have issues, you're going to pay more. And those who want to live healthy lifestyles, you have X plus or X minus if you follow the standards that are necessary to bring the cost down. The other thing is we really do need to shop it. When you went in for a broken foot, you're in an emergency room, you don't have much chance to shop that. But if your doctor says that you need to do some blood testing and you have some skin in the game and you can go to 3 different places and it's $1,000, $500, or $200, you'll go to $200. Well, guess what? The price is going to drop to $200. But we have to start that marketplace. We have to get that going so there's some competition in the marketplace for the dollars that are being spent. Because when people are getting insurance from an employer, they didn't have a deductible and they weren't paying co-pays. They go to the doctor told them to do it, let's go. I could care less whether I go to the clinic or whether I go to SUMA. So it's important that we have consumers, patients, all of us, part of the game to understand what is necessary to bring the cost of healthcare down.
I agree with so much of what you're saying. It's just I would plead with you that look at the possibility of having a separate healthcare insurance program for kids only, because they're getting hurt today.
But how do we unbundle it? Throw it back. How do you bundle that from the employer when 60% of people are getting it?
I'm talking about Medicaid and
okay.
Medicaid only.
I apologize.
Separately for kids.
Got it. I apologize. That's you make a very good point.
Okay. We're glad that you're looking after the Great Lakes and hopefully looking to be sure that EPA is actually spending that money for its intended purpose. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a great deal of concern across the landscape about the lack of responsibility that EPA is taking for looking after the health and safety of the environment. And we all know that air and water don't care about political boundaries, right. So that this is a federal responsibility. That's how it got to be a federal responsibility. And so I want to know what your feeling is about congressional oversight of the Environmental Protection Agency to be sure that it doesn't completely disregard its responsibilities.
Well, thank you. It's a great question because that's one advantage of the 3 committees I'm on. I'm on Interior, which oversees EPA, and Energy and Water, which has the Army Corps of Engineers. And there's no better way to get people's attention than when you control their purse strings. So I managed to have a number of conversations now with the Secretary, and he, initially they were talking about closing the Chicago office of the EPA. I think that stopped. But we're going to stay on top of him, and I've also been working with Secretary Zinke from Interior to get him to come down with me and meet with the EPA in Chicago, or I told him wherever he wants to meet. I was just talking to him the other day. I said, if you come here, I'll take you fishing, I promise. But if we have to go to Chicago, we'll go there. But, we have to focus on, again, it's not a lake or a series of lakes. It's a national treasure. And we have to continue that conversation as a national treasure to keep them focused on it because, we're in a fight, surprisingly, with in Illinois, in Missouri, and some parts with the other waterways that are coming up because they want to keep their locks open and move these. Yeah.
You don't want carp in the Great Lakes.
Right, and we get the carp or any of those invasive species into the Great Lakes. It's game, set, match, and especially in Lake Erie where it's so shallow. Exactly. So it's he understood that, and that's that's the one thing that concerned Secretary Zinke the most.
Yes, and I think, as a former member of the International Joint Commission Science Advisory Board, I can't overstate the importance of international collaboration with Canadians, and that can be handled partially between the states and the provinces for the Great Lakes, but not for the rest of the boundary waters. So I I think it's a really big national concern that it's going to affect the future as the drought cycles from climate change continue to get skewed.
Right. Well, one of the bigger problems too we have with when we talk about trying to come up with funding is the thing that's just shocked me how much we spend on wildfires. And here, you know, we've got all the hurricane damage, and now we got the wildfire out in California. We haven't even started to try to find contingency funds for that yet.
It's not going to get better.
Right. You know, as we get hotter and the earth gets drier, you know, we have to manage our timber in a different way, and you know, we have to cut those lanes in it. So, but I mean, in California, it was just jumping the highway, which would be a natural barrier most times, and. You know, it's a shame because you get these big storms down south, and in the place where you need the rain the most in the fires, you can't get any rain. You know, so there's a lot of problems, and again, we have to keep the science up to follow through and figure out how we can stop this. And one of the other things that we need to do, and if any of you have a home on the shores or things like that, is also that. You know, it's tough to get this flood insurance, but that's going to be a big argument going forward is how we're going to maintain any type of flood insurance, because there's just not funding for it there. And the national government or the federal government's become the backdrop for it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Dave.
Morning.
Thank you for coming to address us today. One of the things that I'm really getting tired of is being told, not paying attention to what's going on in the White House, that we've got somebody in place to take care of it. When you went into office, you took an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it going to take to get you and the rest of the congressmen and women, to stand up and start upholding the Constitution?
Well, you know, that's a good question. You know, I do believe, I'm going to be honest with you, that I do uphold the Constitution. I have not seen the president commit a crime, and you know, I'm a fact-based problem solver. You know, what he says, I don't agree with, but it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of something that is impeachable. And you know, if the Democrats thought they had something, they'd certainly put it out there. They you know, and they don't. Al Green, the guy from Texas who wanted to put it up, or you know, they asked him to bring it down because they know it's just it'll continue to fan the flames. You know, he was elected by a majority of the people, and you know,
No, he wasn't.
all right, he was elected by the Electoral College, but you know, maybe not a majority of the people. But you're right, it was the Electoral College that elected him. But you know, I don't get it myself. I don't get this Steve Bannon going around and talking about trying to put senators.
The standard hasn't been lowered enough for you yet. What I can't imagine the bar that you would use to start taking action. I just can't imagine what it would be.
Well, what do you feel is the thing that would take him out of office? Just because he said something crazy?
For the president, yes.
Okay.
He's supposed to be the leader of our nation and uphold all of our standards, all our core beliefs. He's supposed to uphold those and not tear them down every day. There is a common decency that the president is obligated to uphold. I don't care if he's just pretending to do it, at least he's got to pretend to do it. We cannot continue like this. So I'm looking to Congress to stand up and start doing something about it. Or you know where my vote will be next time.
I understand. Again, I go back to the idea that certainly if he committed a crime, or certainly if this Russia thing pans out and there was some collusion, then that's a criminal act. But the fact,
corruption.
Where's the corruption?
It's all over the place. Just go to the hotel.
Well,
I'll relieve you of trying to answer that because I know you can't.
Well, no. The point is that you know the Constitution gives everyone the right to free speech, right? And you fight. People fought and died for the ability to free speech.
Well, why is he tearing that down every day?
Well, some would say that he's using his free speech to make his points, and you know I get that, but I don't agree with it. But that's you know the reason we have to stand up. I mean, I appreciate that.
Any more questions?
Look, the one thing that I do want to, I don't want to end on that. I got it, but I mean, I want you to understand, at the end of the day, we can't let this guy tear us apart. We're still Americans. And as I tried to talk about before, there's a large group of Democrats and Republicans who deeply love this country, and like myself. And we go to work every day with the idea we want to move this country forward. And, 4 years ago, there was another president, and then another 4 years, will either be this guy or another president. But, the important part is to recognize your ability to vote and make sure people vote, because when only 30% of the people in this country vote in a presidential election, that's when you end up with outcomes like this. And, for us, it was very serious. My father would always say, as a World War II vet who was shot and left for dead, people fought and died for your right to vote. Now get your up there and vote. And, and I'm just amazed that people, you go into some of these elections and people are getting elected in these special elections like down in Alabama with 10, 12, 15% of the electorate. That's not right. I think we need to change the way we go about it. Maybe make voting day a national holiday, if that will encourage more people to go. Maybe make it a month long, or so you can go in, and do it at malls or other spots that you have your voter card that you can plug in, or do it from home with your thumbprint or something. We'll have to find better ways to get people involved in the system. Otherwise, we can't necessarily complain about the outcomes.
I think we have 2 more questions.
Sure.
You mentioned $20 trillion in debt?
And growing, yes.
Yes. How do we bring that down?
Cut spending,
I mean, just think of the astronomical amount of money that is. It's just.
It's roughly, just the interest is roughly $58,000 per person. I mean, we're spending $240 billion right now a year just on the interest on the debt. I've asked this question. Like I say, I'm one that, was the old prosecutor. I mean, what's the problem? How do we get to the bottom of the problem? And my old appropriations chairman, Hal Rogers, is a former prosecutor, so he used to, sort of like a student-teacher thing. I'd go in and ask all these questions, and he'd laugh as he smoked his cigar and start walking me through it. He got there 30 years ago. He said 30 years ago, it was 65% discretionary and 35% mandatory spending. Last year, we actually flipped at the point where it's now 68% mandatory spending and 32% discretionary. So we're not going to cut our way in the discretionary back to getting whole again. We have to change the way we do business with entitlements. So we have to have a serious conversation about how these are going to grow. People who are in the system now, post 65 and Social Security, this is your number. This is where it's going to be. People who are 55 or 45, you're going to maybe get less than what you expected, and you're going to have to pay in maybe a little bit more. And I think we need to raise the cap on, so we put more money into things like Social Security to allow wealthier people who want to put in more, but they're capped in it, that they could put in more. Because a lot of those people aren't the people who are taking out Social Security or counting on Social Security when they're done. But again, we have to have hearings on this, and we have to have. And what I've been trying to push in D.C. is the idea, let's have a whole week of hearings on health care. That's all we have. Every committee of jurisdiction has a hearing on it. Because then all the people in D.C., all those reporters and talking heads have nothing to talk about but health care. And maybe then American people will start to get the message that, hey, this system's broken. Or, this is the things we need to do about climate change. Or, the week at a time, and really get the word out there to people. And make sure that people understand what our problems are and what it's going to take to fix those problems.
My question is, I'd like to know your opinion, if possible, on the Unity Party with Governor Kasich and the governor of Colorado coming together to potentially run for president. Do you have an idea or a vision or a thought on that?
I get the feeling that you're frustrated with the party system as it exists. I can say that I, for one, was for John Kasich for president. I think if you know him at all, the guy you saw hugging people, who is that? Because that wasn't John Kasich. The crusty, thorny guy, John Kasich, is the guy we know. But the last time we had a balanced budget was Penny Kasich. John's a very thoughtful guy. He's a very deliberate guy. But hugging and kissing wasn't in his wheelhouse as far as I knew him. But you know, I think he makes a valid point to some of the people here who are angry about what's going on, is the fact that you can't say these things, you can't do these things. You know, we have to bring America together. And that's the one thing that, you know, I certainly had high hopes for President Obama when he took office, that he would unify the country. You know, we got beyond the idea that it's black against white or those type of things. And we have to remember that, you know, we're one Earth. There's no planet B. You know, we're all here for a limited time in life, trying to pursue happiness and our liberty in whatever way that we see fit. That's the beauty of America. And just because your pursuit of happiness doesn't necessarily agree with mine doesn't make yours any better or worse than mine. So if we could sit down and have intelligent discussions about the real problems that exist in this country, I'm confident we can get some answers and get some things done. And it's not going to be easy. But Americans understand shared sacrifice. And as long as we lay out a game plan to get to the goal of lowering our deficit, of controlling our spending, of making sure our kids get properly educated, of making sure there's a baseline of health care for everyone, if we start off with that, we can win this. But it takes people like yourselves talking about it to each other and in your community, getting your friends out to vote, and making sure that we're electing people who are responsible towards getting those things done. So thank you. Good luck in school, and because, you know, someday all of us are going to be retired, and then, you know, you're our future leaders. So we want to make sure that we have the best and the brightest up there in D.C. or Columbus or wherever you end up. God bless in your career. Thank you all for having me here today. God bless America.
Can you stay just a second? Sure. I'm going to have you help me with something. I want to thank the greeters, Sue Carter, Rebecca Moore, audiovisual crew, Dan Rich, Tom Page, Tom Tobin, James Field, and Ron Barnhouse. And I'm going to have Mr. Joyce do the Rotobuck for us. And it's $14, and $412 is the jackpot.
Ooh, wow. One person might really love me today.
I still do. You get my vote. Oh, got it. You're going to last four numbers.
Last four? 0607.
Oh! Right after me.
Oh, no. There's not like 1.4 million in there.
Thank you, Brett.
Well, it's nice of you to donate all that to the Hudson school system, James.
There you go. And he has to draw the black marble to win the jackpot.
Oh, okay.
That's 1.4.
Oh, all right.
Nope.
It's safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, glad to do it.
And you do have my vote.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
Remember, kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. Thank you for being here. Have a good week.